Hello, my name is Mike Geig, and in this video we are going to discuss using multiple forms in a Windows application in our series on Windows programming with C#. So far we've seen some of the things we can do with a form. We can create all sorts of complex, robust applications. Sometimes having a single form just isn't enough. If you think about any program that you use, if you went to like the help and about and it pops up a new window and it tells you all about the software or the company, um, that's a second form. A lot of times, when you don't have a lot of screen real estate, you want to use multiple forms so you can maximize layouts and things like that. And transitioning between those forms can be fairly tricky sometimes. So let's go ahead and look at creating a multiple form scenario. All right, so I have form 1 here in front of me because I've just created a blank project. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new form to my project. So I'm going to right click on the project name and I'm going to go to add new item and I'm going to select a Windows form, which will just be form 2 in this situation. Alright, so now we have a form 1 and a form 2. They look great. I'm going to go ahead and add a label to each just to help identify them. So form 1 is going to have a label that's going to say, let me center that there, it's going to say form 1, just like that. And form 2 is going to have a label that's going to say form 2. And that way we can more readily identify them. Okay. And I can run it, and of course form 1, oops, I didn't mean to resize that. Form 1 is going to be the one that runs. Form 1 is set up as our default form for running. Okay. Now, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to transition easily from one form to another form. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button to my form 1. It's going to allow me to open my form 2. Alright, and I'm going to add a button to my form 2 that's going to allow me to open my form 1. Okay. And now, oops, I didn't mean to do that. So this button I'm going to change to form 2. And this button I'm going to change the text to say form 1. Alright. So now my form 2 button is responsible for opening up my form 1. So I can go ahead and do this. What I'm going to do is I double clicked on the button to create my event handler. To create a new form 2, alright, it's just like creating an object of any class or creating a dialog or anything like that. I'm simply going to say form 2 my form equals new form 2. Alright, real simple. Since forms are essentially just classes, as we can see form 1 inherits from form, right? Form 2 is just a class that we declared by creating it. And we create this new form 2. Now I'm going to run it, and I'm going to hit form 2. You will notice nothing opened up. I did create an object of form 2, but I didn't show it. Alright, so I've got to do that. So I'm going to say my form dot show right there, and we've got show and show dialog. We'll talk about that here in a second. So I'm going to do my form dot show. So I'll run it and I'll hit form 2 and I get a form 2. Now notice form 2 is not modal. I can go back and forth and work on my other form, right? Form 2 is simply non-modal dialog, whose button doesn't do anything. And I close that and now I'm back on form 1. Awesome. Okay. We can also do on form 2, form 1, my form equals new form 1. Ooh, I forgot a semicolon. And then my form dot show to give us a form 1. So I can go ahead on my form 1, click, hey, form 2. And on form 2, click, oh, but wait, isn't that interesting? Now I have a new form 1. You can see now we're entering into a tricky area here where we are creating new instances of things that we don't want when all we wanted to do was to go back. Okay. Another way I can show this, I can demonstrate a very common programming error a lot of new people make when they come to say form 1 and they say form 2 my form equals new form 2 my form dot show this dot hide. Alright, so what they get is they get this and they hit form 2. Now notice form 1 goes away, and then when they hit form 1 they say, oh, form 1 is back. but form 1 isn't back. When I close this and I close this, you'll notice my code is still running. My program is still running because the original form 1 is still there, still hidden, running in memory. All right, and that's not a good thing. This is what I like to call not closing gracefully. All right. So let's talk about how we can fix this. Well, the first thing we want to do to fix this is to come to form2.cs and stop creating new form 1s. That's a big no-no. All right, I just did that to illustrate the issue that we're having. All right, form 1 already exists. Form 1 existed when you first created it. If the form already exists, you don't need a new one. Okay, and so we're certainly going to get rid of that one there. All right. In form 1, we can still create a form 2 because once we go out of scope, that form goes away. Once we close it, it just comes out of memory garbage collection, gets it. All right, so we don't need to worry about that one necessarily. So this is still fine. All right, so the problem comes then is how do we get back to form 1? Well, one idea is that instead of actually creating a new form 1, we're just going to close this form. All right, this dot close, because form 1's already there. We don't need to create a new one. So when I run it and I hit form 2, now form 1, which will close this form, again we have this problem, but we're getting better. We're getting there. All right. So now our action is a little bit simpler. Form 1 simply creates a form 2 and then hides itself. Form 2 simply closes itself. All right. So that's a much better relationship. Of course, I could just stop hiding form 1. All right. That's easy. So show me form 2, and then form 2 closes, we're back to form 1. But let's say in an environment where I want to hide form 1, how do I bring form 1 back? And the answer to that is by establishing an owner. Okay, so what I can do is I can create my form 2. Form 2 my form equals new form, and then I can say my form dot owner equals this, saying that form 1, because that's what this is in this context, form 1 is the owner of form 2. And then I show form 2 and I hide form 1. All right, we're getting there. And now in form 2, we can say this dot owner dot show. The owner is form 1, so this is saying form 1 dot show. So when I run it now, I say see form 2. All right, and I click this form 1. Hey, we're back. All right, and now my program will close gracefully because I don't have extra forms running in memory. All right, I've created an owner relationship here where form 1 owns form 2, so form 1 can hide itself, and then when form 2 comes back or goes away, I can just say, hey, show my owner, and then form 1 comes back. All right. There's still an issue with this solution right here though, because I can do form 2, and then I can hit this red X. Oh, now I'm messed up again. I closed the form, but I didn't hit the button, the one that shows form 1. So form 1 is still hidden, running in memory. We have no way of getting to it. So the better solution, all right, is to go to form 2, go to my event handlers, and go to my closed event, form closed, right here. Double click on that where the form is closed, and in form closed we put this .owner.show. So if I hit the button that closes form 2, all right, we will fire off this event handler, or if I hit the red X, we fire off this event handler. So now I have form 1, I see form 2, I hit the red X, form 1 is back. All right, and we have successfully navigated the trenches of multiple forms. All right, so I know that's a lot of information. Okay, I kind of went through that fast, and you know, it may not have made a whole lot of sense. So let me just break it down for you here real quick. Okay, these are the general rules of creating multiple forms. All right, you're going to create your new form right here, instantiate an object of the new form. It's a good idea to set the owner of the form so that we can establish a flow of control if we need to. Okay, and that's what we're doing here. We're setting the owner of form 2 as form 1, as this instance of form 1. Then we're showing form 2, and we're hiding form 1. We don't have to hide form 1. I'm just saying if you're in a situation where you do have to hide form 1, then you're going to hide it like this. In form 2, all you have to worry about is closing it, all right, whether it's just a red X or whether you have a button to close it, either way. And then in the closing event, all right, or the closed event, just re-show its owner. Now, if the owner never hid, right, if the owner never hid, then it's not an issue, all right. It's not going to crash your program, but if the owner did hide, it's going to save your program from sticking in memory and not working. All right, so it's a win-win situation to set it up this way. So that's kind of the way of setting up multiple forms, and there's a lot of you can keep cascading this. Form 2 could open up Form 3 and use the safe procedures for that, and so on and so forth. But that's the easiest way to establish a graceful system of linking the forms together. So when one opens, or when one hides, the other one can reopen it. Okay. Awesome. So often, like I said, I see that mistake where programs will end up running in memory, and this here is how you prevent that from happening. It can also be useful for our forms to do something. Okay, so let's say I wanted Form 2 to prompt the user to type in their name, and then we were going to pass that information back to Form 1. All right, so let me come to Form 2's design, and I'm going to go ahead and add a text box. Where's it? There we go. And I'm going to add a label. All right, and I am going to add a button. Okay. We're going to modify how things are working here a little bit. All right, so I am going to take this button here and move it over, and this button here, move it over. I will call this button BTN OK, and it's going to say submit. This button is going to say cancel, and it's going to be BTN cancel. All right, just like that. That's going to be the text box for your name, and this is going to be the label that says enter your name. All right, and we'll call this one txt name. Great. So our program is set up now to where it will prompt the user for the name. They're supposed to be able to type into it, and then they can either hit submit or cancel. Now, Form 1, I'm going to sort of get this ready here by putting a label right here, which we will call LBL name, which will start blank. All right. Now we're set up. I can actually run this, and we'll see Form 1 will open Form 2. Form 2, I'll say Mike, and it doesn't do anything. Submit doesn't do anything, and all cancel does is cancels the program. So our design is there. Now we just need to configure our functionality. All right. So in Form 2, I'm going to go to my designer real quick, and I'm going to show you two things about the buttons that we haven't seen yet. So my submit button, I'm going to click that, and I have this thing called dialog result. Well, that sounds familiar from our dialogues video, doesn't it? So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to pick OK. So when the user clicks submit, we are going to treat that as the user hitting OK on a dialog. And cancel, my dialog result, is going to be cancel. Okay, so that's nice. We'll show you this here in a second. This is going to allow us to use this form just like we used a dialog, like the open file dialog or the color picker dialog. Now here's the funny thing. The submit button and the cancel button are going to do the exact same thing. They're both going to close this form. All right. So if I double click submit to create or to get my button OK event handler, and I'm just going to say this.close as well. Both buttons are just going to close the form. But because we set those dialog results, how they close the form becomes very important. All right. Finally, what we need to do is we need to have a way to get what the user put in here back to Form 1. All right. If you remember when we talked about classes, okay, and we talked about composition, where one class will have an object of another class, all right, we used properties to pass things around. Okay, so I'm going to create properties for that text box. I'm going to create public string name, and we're only going to have a get method, and the get is going to return text box 1, or did I change the name of that? txt name dot text, just like that. Great. So now we have a way of getting that variable back. Our form 2 is done at this point. It's not real fancy, right? And I will show you how these buttons manage to do different things even though they do the same thing. All right. But let's go ahead. We'll just run it right now. It's not going to work just yet. Okay, I got an error. Which brings me here. We're not going to mess around in the designer. The error is that I called this name, and name is already a property of the form. So I'm going to say, well, this is just an example. It's not a very good name. Name user entered. Okay, it's not a great name for a property, but that's the one we'll use because we were having a naming conflict. I can't just use name. I should have remembered that. So, so now we're going to run it. And now we're fine. I'm going to click Form 2. It doesn't matter what I type in here at this point. And if I hit Submit or if I hit Cancel, they both do the same thing. All right. Okay. So our Form 2 functionality is done, but nothing's quite happening yet. Everything else needs to happen in Form 1. If you remember the color picker dialog or the open file dialog, the dialog doesn't do anything besides store the user's response. In this situation, it's no different. The Form 2 is just storing the user's response. It's up to Form 1 to actually use it. Okay, so in Form 1, we see we're gonna take out this this dot hide. I don't want to bother hiding Form 1. So what we got is my Form 2 or Form 2 my form equals new Form 2. My form.owner equals this, my form.show. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say if, or actually, I'm sorry, I'll show you this two ways, without the if statement first. We're going to say label 1 dot text. Did I change that? That's not label 1 on form 1. That's label name. Yeah, I should change that. So it's going to be LBL name dot text equals my form dot user entered, or name user entered. That's right. Okay, so we'll see whatever the name the user entered. Okay, and we're gonna run this, and real quick, just so you know, this isn't gonna work the way we want. So I'm gonna hit OK, or form 2, and I'm gonna type in, and I'm gonna hit submit, but we don't see anything here. Okay, and the reason might not be apparent right away, but I'll explain it to you. The reason is since Form 2 is non-modal, okay, Form 2 pops up and immediately this line of code runs before the user ever has a chance to type in that box. So this is working, but at this exact millisecond, name user entered is empty because the user can't possibly click Form 2 or show Form 2 and then type in that box before this next line of code runs, because the code operation doesn't stop. So what we need to do is we need to show my form differently. We need to show dialog. By showing dialog, we're saying, hey, run form 2 as modal. So this line of code doesn't run until we're done. So I'll run it. I'll hit form 2. Now I can't work with form 1. Form 2 is modal. And now I will say Mike, and I will say submit, and I see Mike. All right. Furthermore, if I run it, I hit form 2, and I say Mike. This happens. Cancel. Mike. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I said cancel. I don't want Mike to show up if I hit cancel. And that's where the if statement comes in. I can say if my form.showDialog equals system.forms.windows.dialog.ok. This should look familiar. Then we change the name. And I run it. I hit my form. I say Mike. I hit cancel. Nothing. I say Mike. And I hit submit. And we see Mike. Well, why does that work? Because in form 2 we said this button has a dialog result of OK. Alright, and so when we come here and we show it as modal, show dialog, we can say, hey, did they hit OK? And if they did, we can do something with that. Alright, so that is a lot of information in one video. Okay, how to successfully transition between two forms is very important. Okay, so pay close attention to that, especially if you're hiding some of the forms. All right, be very careful where you create new forms like this. All right, if you end up creating a new form of a form that's already in play, all right, already running, even if it's hidden, you're going to have multiple instances of a form, and the program may not close gracefully. So you got to be very careful with that. All right. So, if you're having issues with that, please re-watch the video and pay special care to notice those differences. All right. We also talked about passing variables back and forth between two forms. All right. That's very powerful, and we use properties to do it, very much like we've seen before, very much like we see in composition all the time. All right, because that's effectively what we're doing. Form 2 is composing Form 1 in this instance. All right. Now, I do want to point out that after this bracket, all right, and Form 2 gets closed, everything that was stored in Form 2 goes away. So you can't store a name in Form 2 and then expect it to still be there, unless you make the Form 2 object part of the class. All right, oops, we'll say private. If we do this, all right, just like I have it set up here, then the Form 2 stays in memory as long as this object of the class is in memory, and we can keep going back to it to find that name. All right, I'm not saying that's a good idea, I'm just saying you can do it. It all depends on the needs of your program. All right, and so otherwise you just do it right here, and then it's local to this code block. Okay, so that's going to wrap up my video on working with multiple forms. In the next video, we are going to talk about creating controls dynamically or programmatically.